Welcome to a new edition of Mob Talk Sit-Down. I'm Dave Schratweiser.
And I'm George Anastasia.
George, less than a month to the release of Joey Merlino from prison. He's been on house arrest, but he's a free man in less than a month.
Yeah, it's a continuing Joey Merlino story. All eyes on Joey. What's he going to do? Where's he going to do it?
All right, George, less than a month till Joey Merlino gets his freedom. Not totally free, but your thoughts. Off of house arrest, he's been furloughed since the COVID-19 situation started. He's been at home, but he's going to be released and a free man in about a month.
Yeah, I mean, Joey does not like to be on supervised release. He doesn't like to have anybody controlling what he does and where he goes, but I think he can live with this kind of situation. And if you remember, this is an outgrowth of that case, was the East Coast of Cosa Nostra, big mob case.
Yeah.
It was pretty much a bust for the feds. Joey ended up pleading guilty to a gambling charge, getting 2 years doing less than one, and now, he's back in business. I don't want to, I don't know what the business is.
Yeah.
What's his role going to be? Is there a role? And if not, who?
Okay, if you're Joey Merlino, put your hat on there, what would you do?
I'd stay in Florida, and I think he will stay in Florida. The other thing is, someone once said to me, with this whole organized crime thing, vice is commerce. It's about making money. Not a lot of money being made right now. Think about this. I mean, we were dealing with the COVID. Pro sports is shut down. If you're a bookie, who are you taking bets on?
Right.
I mean, the Premier League soccer just started. You're going to take, what's the over and under on Manchester City versus Liverpool?
Yeah.
It's not, the money is not there right now.
Yeah, a little bit of horse racing, but not much there.
Not much. You're going to bet on golf. It's, the basketball and football are big money makers, and there's not a lot of money to be made. Even before all of this, it was starting to, diminish. So you talk about organized crime. What's their role? The organization in Philadelphia is diminishing in terms of numbers. Is there an economic engine anymore? That's a real question.
Yeah.
And if there is an economic engine, what is it, and who's running the show?
Yeah, even loan sharking seems to have dried up a little bit from what I'm hearing.
Well, I mean, I think all of it is economics. It all comes down to economics. And there's nothing going on right now. What are you going to do? That's what it comes down to. The interesting thing is, you've got these economic stimulus packages.
Yeah.
There's no economic stimulus package for a bookie.
Good line. I like
bets.
that. I like that.
I mean,
that's
what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I
no
think
government loans.
Sometimes we lose sight about what this is really about is money. It's economy. And guys operate outside the law, and what they're really doing is trying to generate income. That's what it's about.
All right, so if Joey's not the guy at the top, assuming that he decides to stay in Florida, stay low-key.
Smart move,
Joe Legambi's retired. He's not the top guy. Let's talk about who could possibly be the top guy. And I'll say it, just from observations on the street, it appears that George Borghese is the guy in charge. I'm not saying he's the guy in charge, but at least from appearances, it does look like that.
Yeah, I mean, he would deny that, and the other question is in charge of what?
Yes.
That's what we just talked about.
Right.
I mean, he's certainly a player. He's certainly somebody on the radar of law enforcement.
Right.
He's a guy that they know. He's got a history. Several other guys as well. And it keeps coming back to, what do you want to be in charge of? What is there out there to be in charge of? And that's what we don't know. And, we know the feds are constantly looking, but I think everything is pretty much low-key right now. I don't think anything is really active right now. Everybody's just kind of watching, observing who's hanging out with who, but what are they doing?
Yeah, exactly. And let's be fair to George Borghese. He has said repeatedly, multiple times, he's doing nothing criminal, nothing wrong. He's involved in legitimate businesses, and I'm just hanging out with my friends.
Yeah, and I think if he were, he'd have heard from the feds already.
Sure.
He's a guy they're aware of. Same thing with several other guys. And it all comes back to, how serious are the feds about pursuing this? Joey has really undermined a couple investigations. That East Coast La Cosa Nostra is one. Joey beat a big murder rap up in Newark.
Yeah.
The racketeering case against Joey and George, those guys back in '01, they didn't get the more serious convictions in that case. So the feds have taken a couple hits with these guys in Philadelphia. They haven't been ultimately successful to the degree that they put these guys away forever.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're coming again unless they got something serious.
They got to take a big swing here.
Yeah, and I don't think it's there right now.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Let's talk about the next level down. Some guys have clearly stepped back here, not wishing to be in the limelight.
Right.
Michael Lancelotti, Stevie Mazzone, Marty Angelina, people like that. Old-time friends of George's and Joey's, boyhood friends. They seem to have at least taken a step back at this point. Where do they stand? That next tier down?
Well, yeah, and I mean, you could argue that they're taking a step back, or you can argue that they've gotten smarter since they've been burned a couple
Absolutely,
times.
yeah, sure.
I mean, I think that, the really old school guys, The whole idea is make money, not headlines, stay in the shadows.
Right.
And I think these guys, realize that. And so, there's constantly, there's an organization, but we've said this before, they don't issue a flow chart, they don't issue an annual report, so we don't really know.
Yeah.
And the feds don't know.
Yeah.
So you can only speculate. And there's some young guys coming up. I mean, Dominic Grandy's another guy.
Let's talk about that a little bit. If none of those guys are the guy, or none of them wants the title and wants to take that step back, do they push a guy like Dominic Grandy, who's supposedly a capo, do they push him up to the top and make him the guy and not take the heat as the number one guy?
Well, I mean, I suppose that could happen. The other question in terms of the Philadelphia mob, given the history of mob bosses in Philadelphia, is who the hell would want to be a boss?
Yeah.
You end up dead or in jail. So there's that as well. I don't know. I mean, certainly Dominic Grandy is the next generation. Yeah. And he's certainly a guy the feds are interested in for a lot of different reasons. But we've been hearing about the investigation, that drug case that came out of Atlantic County, Joey Electric and those guys.
Sure.
His name was on the fringe of that. He's never been charged with anything.
No, and let's be clear, he hasn't been charged with anything. He's no outstanding charges. We don't know of him being a target of anything in particular.
Yeah.
But again, his name keeps popping up, and they call him an up-and-comer.
Yeah,
so to speak.
and all of this is speculation, and unless and until we see something from the feds, and I'm kind of getting tired of saying this.
Yeah, well, I'm real tired of saying it.
If and when, well, maybe there's nothing there, and who knows? We'll see.
Bring it. If you got it, bring it.
Yeah.
All right, George, let's talk about the 10-year anniversary this month of the murder of Rocco Maniscalco down on Wolf Street in South Philadelphia, still unsolved. Your thoughts about that 10 years later? Yeah,
I mean, this is a guy who had an auto body shop, a towing company, and it was a bookmaker. And he's coming back. He was at a 17th and Wolf, a cafe, watching a Flyers game. It's in June, Stanley Cup, back in 2010. On the way back to his house, walking, and he gets blown away. 10, 12 shots, a lone shooter. And there's a lot of speculation about where it came from and why. And I think that his family talked to the Daily News, I think a year later, talked about a couple different things. One was a $60,000 debt. Some drug dealers had borrowed money or debt, and they owed him 60 grand. They weren't paying, he was balking. Is that the source of the hit? Or was he being shaken down by wise guys and did he refuse to pay? Neither one of those, I mean, both of those are speculation. There could be an entirely different reason we don't even know about, but those were the two theories I think law enforcement was working on. Interesting guy, Rocco. I didn't know him. He's 38 years old. I think he was the great nephew of Harry Riccobene, Harry the Hunchback. And Harry was, I mean, if it's in the genes, Harry was a real independent guy, and apparently this guy Rocco was a very independent
entrepreneur,
guy.
really, it sounds like, in South Philly. He ran a pretty good shop, from what I understand. Put some guys to work when they came out of jail and needed to be back at work. I have heard one report that a high-ranking member of the Philly mob also wanted a kind of no-show job at his place, and that could be behind it. But most of it sounds like he loaned $60,000 to somebody. They spent the money, lost the money, and weren't paying it back. He was making a lot of noise about it. Yeah, that would make more sense. I mean, is this a mob hit? Possibly, but I don't think so. If it is, it's one of the, what do we got now, 4 or 5 unsolved mob hits that sit out there. More likely, I think it had to do with that 60 grand and the connection with some drug dealers. And that's a kind of bold place to do a shooting, Wolf Street. That is a busy spot right there. He was walking a block home to his house, and he's gunned down right there on the street. A gunman comes out of the shadows at around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night after the game, and he gets hit. I mean, that's a hit. That harkens back to the Scarfo days. During the Scarfo era in the 80s, that's the way hits went down. Very much broad. You want it out there. You want people to know Scarfo was a cowboy. These guys, I think, are more low key, and I think these guys realize that a hit generates all kind of problems. The other thing is, Ronnie Previty used to say this: if you're doing business with a guy and you're making money with him, or you're trying to make money with him, and you kill him, the source of your money's no more money.
So what's the point of all of that? So I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting case. It's a cold case. I know the family has put up a reward money. There was some reward money out there, almost 10 grand. Nobody's come forward. I think this is one of those cases where somewhere down the road, somebody who knows something will get jammed up in another criminal investigation, and in order to get out from underneath that rock, they'll give something up about this. And there is a wise guy who lives about a block away from that scene, never been mentioned or charged in this situation, but that proximity of that kind of makes people talk down there too. But the bottom line is this murder won't go away, and if the feds are indeed looking at murders, this would be one of the ones they're looking at. I mean, it never goes away, but you got a lot of dots. You try to connect the dots, and sometimes 2 and 2 they make 8. That's not the case here. We don't know. and whether this will figure into an organized crime investigation or whether it's going to be an isolated incident involving some hard-ass drug dealers and a $60,000 debt remains to be seen.
Let's say something about Rocco Maniscalco. He was not a serious organized crime figure or anything like that here in Philadelphia. He was a businessman, entrepreneur. He was probably doing some things he shouldn't have been doing based on what we've been told by everybody around him. But the bottom line here is this is not a major mob guy getting taken out in the streets of Philadelphia.
No, this is, from what I know, this was a guy who went to work every day.
Yeah.
Hard-working guy.
Yep. Tow company's not easy to do.
Yeah, and he had a book on the side. I mean, you know, taking bets. I mean, the casinos take bets.
Yeah.
Nobody takes that, is offended by that anymore. And it's unfortunate if that was the source of what his demise was.
Yeah. All right, George, finally, interesting court decision coming out of Staten Island on Anthony Camello, the alleged gunman in the murder of Gambino crime boss Frank Cali.
Right. This is over a year now. He was declared incompetent to stand trial, to participate in his own defense. Now, whether that's the end all of the thing, we don't know. I mean, I think though he's going to be evaluated, and he still may end up going to trial. He's charged with murder. And if this is one of those examples where you take 2 and 2 and get 8, when it first happened, everybody said, "Oh, big mob hit."
Yeah.
Now it turns out, it looks like this guy was a little bit wacky.
Yeah.
He was involved in that QAnon right-wing conspiracy.
Wrote it all over his hand in court.
Yeah, and somehow he linked Frank Cali to this deep state business. I mean, it's very, very bizarre.
Yeah.
It's a defense that may get him off of the murder charge, but may end up in, in a psychiatric ward.
Yeah.
That's where it looks like it's heading. But again, this is the kind of thing where it's the first step. He's declared incompetent right now to participate in his own defense.
Yeah.
That may change as he's further evaluated.
Yeah.
But
sent him to a facility, in fact, to get further evaluation.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
But this is, this was a mob hit that wasn't a mob hit.
Yeah, and it was interesting, all kinds of co-conspirators are like, well, they got this guy, he's a dupe, and they put him up to doing the hit and that kind of thing. But there's been no evidence of that at all.
None at all. It's just, it's one of those bizarre things. I mean, sometimes things just happen.
All right, George, one final note. Some sources telling me that an FBI agent and a Pennsylvania state trooper have been knocking on doors in South Philadelphia, kind of throwing a line out there to some of the guys looking for a hook.
Yeah, it's summertime and they're fishing, but so far I don't think they've gotten anything.
All right, good fishing weather. We'll see you then next time.